Does Kia last longer than Toyota? 10 years ago, that would have been an easy one to answer, but today things have changed a little bit. So today we're gonna talk about and compare the likes of the Kia Seltos here, which is a vastly improved drivetrain over the previous generation vehicles. We're gonna compare it to the Toyota Rav4, a similar vehicle in its class, and discuss which one in fact has a better reliability, which one's more popular, and which ones do customers actually decide to hold on to, because to be honest, that's the telling feature. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
Toyota and Lexus products have typically been known for massive reliability. Didn't matter which drivetrain, which year, which model, you definitely had a vehicle that you could trust and you knew it would go hundreds of thousands of miles. But things have changed a little bit in the Toyota scene. Toyota has now adopted more turbocharged engines, like in the Lexus vehicle lineup. They've replaced the 350, which used to be a naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6. They've now replaced that with a turbo 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine, which critics have to say, I'm not sure reliability is going to hang on for that much longer. As well, we can't forget that Toyota also has adopted the electric water pump, which BMW veered away from because we knew that they were having problems in some of their older turbo 6-cylinder engines, eating up water pumps because of them being located in close proximity of turbochargers, and they would melt down. It might only last 60,000 miles. Toyota now has adopted electric water pumps and turbocharging. So things are changing. As well, we can't forget Kia. They've had their share of issues. Go back 5 or 10 years, lots of problems with engines that were blowing up, engine roadside fires. You'd talk about problems with the metal particulate in the filings coming off of the machining going into the cooling jets, and of course that plugging off rod bearings and rod bearings overheating, creating hot spots, check engine lights and rod knock, and eventually sometimes roadside fires. And a lot of those Kias had garnered a massively bad reputation for those particular generation of engines. Kia has now moved on from that. They've generated different motors and engines in some of their new vehicles, and we have to talk about that. Let's talk about what we're looking at here, the latest in generation from Kia, and we're talking about Seltos. Now there are a few issues here to talk about, but we want to mention that these modern day Kias now actually rank very, very high. Based on cars.com, for both vehicles, the modern day 2023 Toyota Rav4 as well as the Kia Seltos, they both get roughly about a 3 out of 32 manufacturers in terms of top reliability and trustworthiness, because the vehicles have done people basically right. So clearly things have gone in the right direction for Kia, and Toyota seems to continue on and holding their top spot. RepairPal also states that the Toyota Rav4 is actually good for 4 out of 5, and the annual cost of servicing is only about $350, whereas the Kia Seltos like this is similar dollars per year servicing and also garners about a 4 out of 5 stars in terms of overall reliability. So clearly it's satisfying mechanics across the nation. Now also, according to cars.com, where we talk about consumers and their overall satisfaction, they polled the general population, and would you actually believe it? The Kia Seltos, as we're looking right here, has garnered massive popularity. Most customers are ecstatic with the quality of these vehicles and the resulting experiences that they've gained over the last few years. Now granted, we've got to realize the Seltos is a relatively new model. It's only a few years old now, so time will tell, but so far things are looking up. 93% of customers who own the Seltos would definitely do it all over again, according to cars.com. And as well, when we talk about the Rav4, the latest version, the 2023, it's actually down. And now maybe some of that's because people have a higher level of expectation with Toyota products, and if they're let down in any way, maybe they're a little more likely to actually put a little red X next to that vehicle. But whatever it is, only 77% of owners of their Toyota Rav4 of the latest generation are satisfied and would likely do it again. So clearly, the Kia Seltos seems to gain an edge up in popularity by the public over the Toyota Rav4. Now we might as well start with some of the common repair issues or the problems that we're experiencing in the Toyota Rav4 world. I mean, any car can break and anything can go. A water pump, a thermostat, you know, an alternator, anything can really go. But the common issues that are out of sorts for the Toyota Rav4, there's 3 major ones. One of them is the evaporator system. And of course, have you ever noticed when you go here and you crank this and you go to put fuel in there and it keeps clicking even though you know there's not enough fuel in the vehicle, but it keeps clicking, and it won't take the fuel on? Well, sometimes that's the evaporator canister, and that is a common issue with a lot of Toyota Rav4 issues that seem to keep repeating themselves. There's another problem that keeps eluding even the dealers on a good day. Some of the issues with that happen to be related to the catalytic converter, which is based underneath the vehicle. When you look under the vehicle there, you'll see off the exhaust system, off the engine, you'll run into the catalytic converter, and you've got all the other silencers and resonators and everything underneath the exhaust system right there. And it is unfortunately that catalytic converter that is known to be a problem child. Check engine lights seem to be recurring on these Rav4s. Somebody gets a check engine light, they plug in, it says catalytic converter overheat or failure. You go through it, they do the diagnostics further, and there's no problem. Then they do a reboot, you drive it for a while, and it comes back later on sometime. It's just one of those issues that keeps creeping in for Toyota Rav4 owners from time to time. I can also speak from, in this vehicle, the infotainment system on some of the Toyotas. We have a new Camry, and we also notice, and it's a similar system, that glitched out. It would light up, you turn the car's running, and it says the radio station is on and music's outputting, and you can change it and turn up the volume, but nothing's coming out of the speakers. And that was a common issue with that Toyota. And it seems like infotainment systems, and it wasn't until they disconnected the battery, reconnected it, that it all came back. So it needed some kind of a hard reboot, something clearly going wrong with some of the Toyota vehicles in that regard. And another issue with some of the Toyota Rav4s, let me pop the hood on this vehicle. But clearly we have a Kia here. However, similar configuration where we have a transversely mounted engine and a transmission behind it, and what you have is actually the exhaust system behind that. So if you look down there, you'll see that plug right there with the wire coming off of it right there. That is your oxygen sensor. That little plug knobby right there, that's your oxygen sensor, and that is there to detect the amount of balance coming out of the exhaust. So a result of your combustion, the fuel air mix, and it goes out. Well, there's a certain amount of oxygen within that emissions that it should have, and if that blend is off, that sends a note back to the computer to say, hey, we need to recalibrate. And I mean, oxygen sensors can fail on any car, and some vehicles have more of a higher likeliness of happening. The Jaguar F-Type is notoriously known for eating up oxygen sensors, and a lot of vehicles are, especially vehicles that produce more or emit more carbon from the exhaust system. Now, unfortunately, the O2 sensors are another issue with the Toyota Rav4s that seem to be popping up time and time again. While it's not a hugely expensive repair, it does cost you an inconvenience, sometimes a tow, but generally just an appointment at the dealership, a diagnostic fee, and a new oxygen sensor, and away you go, out the door. But either way, it's still that inconvenience and the fact that things are failing on it. Again, they're not massive things, they're not blowing up engines or transmissions, but they are issues, nickel and dime, and a lot of customers are losing some of the faith in some of the products, as I mentioned, the electric water pumps. Now, I'm generally a believer also, the way a vehicle's put together, how tight it is, the lacking and rattles and squeaks are a bit of an indication, as a precursor to what you could anticipate for mechanical issues as well. The stiffer, the more rigid vehicle, the vehicle that seems to be better put together, often in my opinion and my experience, has been a vehicle that has less issues typically. And so with that, we're going to share and join in the quality experience right after I explain some of the key issues that people are finding out with this Kia Seltos. So let's talk about some of the issues here. There's three major things that seem to afflict the Kia Seltos. One is people driving along, they hit a stop sign or a red light, and all of a sudden the car will stop and it won't restart, and they're just stuck there and they're having to get a tow. There's another one that seems to afflict the transmission. Well, that's why they have this little interlock removal, because apparently what's been going on, some cases people cannot get the vehicle out of park. So you put the vehicle into park when you go in the house at night, and then you come out the next day and the car's running, and you use the button, the interlock, and you try to pull this down, but it won't come out of park, and the vehicle can't get in gear, and of course you can't set off. And that's a big issue. You can't get a vehicle into gear, you're not going anywhere very fast, are you? You might have to call a tow truck. So that's another big issue, is somehow with the interlocks and the transmission. And then there's another really big problem that afflicted about 150,000 vehicles allegedly, related to oil control rings. Yeah, the engine didn't have enough heat treatment in the rings, and it resulted in lots of oil consumption. The engines were consuming oil at an alarming rate, and then sometimes it would just run out of oil and people weren't checking it soon enough, and then the engine would catastrophically fail, and you'd have a piece of beautiful yellow sculpted garbage. Now, it's an unfortunate turn of events, especially since Kia has had a whole rash of issues with the engines blowing apart related to those rod bearings, but this is an entirely different issue. This is just your piston rings, and in most cases, you could rebuild the top end and the vehicle would be on its journey. There's been a couple of stories where people got a whole new engine, but that was only because the dealerships didn't have enough time to actually rebuild it in their shop. And they basically just said, you know, here, put a new engine, we have one on the crate. And then the other issues are more nickel and dime, but for the most part, people are satisfied with the way the Kia Seltos is performing, and the expected mileage you would anticipate to get out of this vehicle is easily 150,000 to 200,000 miles if you don't have one of those few catastrophic boomers. The Toyota Rav4, do you think that one would last as well? Well, time will tell. But let's get into the quality experience and then summarize it at the end. And here's the Rav4. So it's a compelling conversation. Do you think the Kia Seltos can outlast the Toyota Rav4? Lots of people think one way or the other. Well, let me tell you one thing. From my drive behind the wheel, from all of the experience that I know, and even the trending that what we're dealing with Toyota's a spectacular brand for reliability. Kia, they've come a long ways, and this represents great value. As I said already, I do believe this car is good for 150 to 200,000 miles, and a Rav4 is probably good for 300,000 plus. So hope that answers it for you. And with all of that said, right there, check it out. That is the Toyota versus Mercedes reliability comparison. Which one will last longer? Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.